Okay, we are live. We'll see people joining, which is always good. Kat, how have you found working from home? Are you kind of working from home quite often before anyway? So quite a favourite.
No, not really. I mean, I'm doing some online client things, which I was previously. So we know how to work this way, but not to this extent. So yeah, I'm doing all right. But it's definitely an experience, let's say.
Yeah.
My cat's also stolen most of my chair. So I'm sitting on the very front of the chair and he is sleeping behind me. Yeah, so
Brilliant.
all good, but he's the boss. So.
There were some funny things, weren't there, around cats being incredibly upset because their humans are now not leaving them alone.
Oh yeah, he totally hates us. We used to be best friends, and now I would say he's really at the end of his tether with both me and my boyfriend in the house all the time.
Well, we can run a sort of a pet owner's therapy session. Bring your cat along and see if you can repair the relationship.
Absolutely, yeah. Or take him on his own. Just let him go on his own. He doesn't want us to be there probably nowadays.
So guys, I thank you so much for joining. I can see the numbers are going up, so we'll probably just give it another minute, just so everybody gets to. People are saying hello. It's always nice. Thank you. Yeah, give it another minute just so everyone gets to hear the start. As always, do be vocal in the chat and ask lots of questions. So I think we'll ask who's listening from the furthest. So we're in London and Amsterdam, I think. Is that right, Kat?
I mean, yeah, I'm in Amsterdam.
Amsterdam, yeah. Who has joined that is furthest from Amsterdam or London? This is my very fun games I like to play. Nobody yet. Disappointing. Oh, here we go. Oh, Maastricht, not bad. That's pretty good. Thanks, Hans. Shall I call some people out? Where is Menno from? Or Copenhagen from Morton? I think it was 2 weeks ago we were doing it. We had someone from Asia and some from San Francisco. We did a full lap of the earth, basically.
Impressive.
All right, I think we can probably get going. Actually, we've got quite a few people on, and I'll do the boring intro bit, which should give time for everyone else to join, and then the fun bits can begin from Kat. Cool. So let me just move these windows. So Kat, I don't know if you wanted to just share your initial slide, but yeah, from me. So Chris over at Icon, thank you again to everybody that joins. I think this is our fourth one now, and the number of attendees is increasing each week. So hopefully that means you guys that have joined for the second, third, or fourth time, you must be enjoying it. And we really do like to keep these as interactive as possible. So we'll throw out some questions towards the end. And so, yeah, do feel free to share. If you ask any questions that, we can't answer there and then, we will follow up with you afterwards. So don't worry about asking the more tricky ones. And Kat, don't worry, I won't throw them at you. But yeah, so big thank you to Kat today, joining from Wunderman Thompson, and she'll be talking about how e-commerce can innovate and optimize in the current climate. We, as always, will be recording this, so if you have to drop off halfway through, sadly, we'll send that out, and do feel free to share the recording with other people and invite people along. Last but not least, we have got some great speakers lined up, but very happy to add more speakers to the roadmap as such. So do share anyone you want to speak with and topics you'd like us to cover. And with that, Kat, I will hand over to you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Chris and Alice. So hi guys, I'm Kat and I'm from Wunderman. So Wunderman's a pretty big company, actually. We have several different divisions and we employ about 1,500 people. The commerce division is specifically centered around the maintenance and improvement of your digital channels. Myself personally, I work within the customer experience team, and it's a pretty broad term, but we mostly look at things like optimisation, communication strategy, brand positioning, and how they all tie together to create a seamless digital experience for the consumer. So that's us and me in a nutshell. I just have a few of our clients to shout out as a little bit of an intro. So again, such a big group, we're working with quite a few big names across many territories. So let's get right into it. I think to start off with, I'd just like to explain how we see optimisation at Wunderman. And I'm sure a lot of you will already be quite familiar with the practice, but I hope this intro can just kind of give you a top line understanding of the way we work. So, as you can see, a lot of post-its. What does it represent? Well, this is actually the idea that a lot of businesses have great ideas for improvement, but the problem is they struggle to judge their relative value. They are often quite slow to put the ideas being built or actioned into practice, and they're not sure whether they worked or not in the end. So we get to a point where optimisation comes in and solves everything. So we really do think optimisation is a great way to help you achieve your business goals and test new ideas in a way that's sustainable and that can really help drive differentiation and growth within your business. That's Andy, who's actually a great guy who always hits his business targets, hits the centre of the dartboard. Anyway, some of the most successful modern businesses in the world actually agree with us. If you look from the right there, Amazon, Google, Netflix and Booking all pride themselves and differentiate themselves on the experimentation mindset, on the optimization frameworks they use to really drive competitiveness and stay ahead of the market. And they've all really internalized optimization as a way of working and as really a business model. So if we get into it a bit more deeply in terms of the point of today, I obviously want to talk to you about how you can optimize and innovate in the current climate. So I just want you all to think back for a second to pre-corona times. Things were simpler, changes happened slower, and we were all a bit more at our leisure to make plans for improvements in business, in life and home, with a fairly constant and stable expectation of what was to come. Things which would change could mostly be predicted to an extent and with a force which moved in quite a slow and sedate way. Then, in a market in Wuhan, something happened which none of us could have predicted. And now we're, I think, 1 month, 2 months for some people, into a global corona crisis, which has embattled nations, embattled economies, and left some people in a position which is quite desperate, and some businesses in a position which is totally unprecedented for these times. Now, if we look here, you can see probably what is quite a familiar image, which is more than 700 million people are currently stuck at home, nothing to do. And this has really shaped and changed consumer behaviour in a very short space of time. So if we look into this in a bit more depth, consumer behaviour since Corona began, I have a few different stats I've picked out for you. So this one is an overall comparison of commerce across both on and offline channels with March 2020, which is obviously the first full month of the lockdown, against March 2019. So what we can see is, whilst there's been some growth in online, there's been a huge decline in retail, and this has led to an overall decline in sales figures across different types of commerce. However, it's not all doom and gloom, because some different industries have seen a huge reach in online traffic and an increase in the number of people who are visiting their digital channels and websites, notably supermarkets, media, telecom, and marketplaces or tech retail. I also just wanted to highlight the types of purchases which have increased since the coronavirus began. So perhaps understandably, health and hygiene is a huge preoccupation for people at the moment. Household cleaning products as we seek to improve our immediate environments. Food and drinks, got to stay alive, and you can rely on food to help you with that. Things like home entertainment, and of course DIY, because if we are stuck inside, why not make it look a bit prettier? So these are some of the trends that we're seeing within March, within that first month, of how people are behaving as a result of Corona. But like I said before, it's not all doom and gloom, because Disruption is the fuel for innovation. And this is actually an economic theory which quite a few different business schools, such as Harvard and also others around the world, have actually pointed at. It's an idea that huge disruption really creates ingenuity, new ideas, and adaptation. It's also a theory, of course, that Darwin spoke about: the most adaptable survive, and that's definitely the case in business here. So to substantiate this a bit, I actually have a few examples that you may be aware of for when this has happened before in the past. First of all, the Great Depression. That was starting off in 1929 in the States, and it had global repercussions around the world. You may not be aware, but this is actually a time when many believe modern marketing was formed, and many of us on the webinar today perhaps owe a lot to it in terms of our jobs and the industries we work in. So the Great Depression was an innovative point, of course, because a lot of people were losing jobs. And what it did was actually make one of the pioneers of marketing, Edward Bernays, think back to the First World War, which had just ended a few years earlier. Now, what he did was apply some of the principles of propaganda, which up until this point had only been used in wartime situations, to the consumer. And he released a book called Propaganda, which was a pioneering study into how you could influence consumers in a way that you'd influence the population in wartime. Now, this book was a huge success, and it led to an explosion and proliferation of improvements and innovations in marketing from 1929 on. We actually saw, particularly in the UK, but also in the US and around the world, formation of several giants of marketing agencies who are still massive in the world today. I really recommend the book if you guys ever fancy a lockdown read, because it's still highly relevant. And Bernays was in fact the nephew of Sigmund Freud. So claim to fame, it was a great family of psychologists. So the second example, we're skipping forward some time into the future now towards the dot-com bubble. And this is an artist's interpretation of how that looked. I know it wasn't exactly like this, but 1999, we of course saw a huge amount of companies which have been valuated incredibly highly come down in value over a very short period of time, which completely affected the landscape, the economy, and a business. So our second innovation relates to the world of DVDs for rent, because you may not be aware, but Netflix actually started out in a few different ways before the dot-com bubble began. They did video production, they did streaming, but not enough people understood what streaming was to really justify it. And it's really when the dot-com bubble broke and they lost over 50 million in their funding that they had the unlikely idea of working in mail-to-order DVDs. Now, they approached Blockbuster about this opportunity, who at the time were the real kingpins of DVD and video rental, but were rejected to own a 50% stake in Netflix's business. So what they did instead was they went away and they created the killer business model that we all know and love. And although Netflix has since pivoted again towards streaming and is the absolute giant lord of streaming now, they still make over 212 million a year from DVD rentals in the US alone as a result of poor broadband connections in certain communities. So whilst they have indeed pivoted again from this point, it was really made to order or made to rent DVDs, which saved them and that led to the new product innovations, which have now led to the Netflix that we know today. So a third one is, again, more recent in the future, it's the 2007 or 8 financial crash. You may not be aware of this one, but another of the biggest companies that we all interact with day to day is Airbnb. And that was actually started by a group of bankers who needed to rent out their flats post-crash. So times of disruption really do create different types of innovation, and today is no different. So what I'm going to talk to you about next is 2 different ways that you can innovate. The first being in e-com and the second in product. So the first point that I wanted to raise is empathetic email content to entertain and drive traffic. So understandably, at the moment, we have a lot of different people who are stuck online, who are really bored and looking for entertainment. And a lot of those people are actually relying on email to entertain. So what I've done here is I've actually picked out some examples of brands who have been able to really go beyond their core product offering or their core focus to provide additional services and ways to entertain people whilst they're stuck inside. The first one is actually from a shoe brand who has been able to create an interactive drawing class, interactive haircutting class. What they want to do is, whilst they can't necessarily offer you products and services that you may be interested in whilst you're stuck inside, obviously fashion retail have taken a hit because people are less bothered about pressing each other outside, and therefore shoes are taking a hit. They still want to make sure they're adding value to your life as a consumer and keep you in a way that they hope can be sustainable for when we come out of the other side. Secondly, I have online yoga streaming. So this is perhaps an obvious one because the brand itself is a yoga brand. Now, of course, it's impossible to go to yoga studios anywhere in Europe and the US, but what they have done is started online streaming of their classes. Obviously, you can join as a subscriber, but also as a non-subscriber. They're opening this up as something that's donation-based and not limited to you as a fee payer already. So they're really reaching out beyond their core user base who are already supporting them financially to a group who, again, may become possibly supporters post-corona, or who may just be looking to try something new and who might not have thought that yoga could be a way to pass the time. I think it is becoming bigger and bigger as something to counterbalance the stress of being stuck inside. The third option is Spotify. So this is something of a bigger and more interactive initiative. You may have heard of One World Together at Home. Now, this was organised by Global Citizen last Friday and Saturday, and involved a huge number of celebrities and A-list stars, musicians coming together to record home concerts and raise money for the World Health Organization and various supporting initiatives. So what they've done is emailed all of their Spotify user base and thanked them for, of course, continuing to listen during these tough times, and then given what is a fairly exclusive, whilst not fully exclusive, appearing in that way to the consumer or to the listener, making sure they got early access to that information to keep them entertained. I just want to caveat that I'm not particularly a Coldplay fan, but he is a very big name, so I think that's why they've used him there. Okay, next I have some information for you on capturing and converting your corona traffic. Now, the times we're living in are unprecedented for a lot of different retailers because for the first time we're seeing certain types of traffic who haven't previously been online moving en masse to start doing incredibly important things as part of their everyday routine. So don't worry, I have another example, which is the young people as well. But I thought I'd start with this particular generation of the seniors because they've been featured a lot in the news recently as being required for the first time to shop online. They're sometimes living in rural communities. They don't always have access to a car or a helper or young family to go and collect food orders for them. And so in increasing numbers, they are moving online for the first time to make things like their food shopping orders. They also, of course, fall into the category of people who have more time to spend now that they're seeing family less, going out less, and therefore they're browsing the internet. So what I have here is a study which was done on usability across different age groups. And as you can see, we have seniors when they were 11 years younger, seniors where they are age-wise now, and users aged 21 to 55. So a combination of Gen Z, Millennial, and Gen X. What you can see is that as time goes by, as age goes up, the success rate of completing a task online, so a usability task, decreases. And we also see the amount of time spent on a task goes up, the errors goes up, and the rating of how they felt about that online experience goes down. So all of these facts are meant to paint the picture to you that seniors need a bit more help when browsing online. They don't necessarily always like trying new things, their lives aren't so digitized, and they've already come up with perfectly good solutions that a lot of the digital world provides, which are offline. So if we're going to take this age group and optimize for them, there are a few things to bear in mind. The first is around viewability and accessibility. So on the left, I have a 36-point font, which is on a tablet. On the right, a 12-point font on a mobile. Now, when older users are surveyed and when we do usability testing with them, they unanimously vote to prefer the tablet and to prefer the larger font size. That may sound obvious, but I know a lot of designers and design agencies that really prize aestheticism and the sleek Apple look over accessibility for all. And these would do well to remember that in these times, it's not just about the look and feel for the younger generation. It's also those older users who are venturing online, who generally have a higher amount of disposable income and more security that need to be catered for. Right, the second part is around memorability, and this is a very important point in usability design. So generally speaking, the senior generation have a lot of offline, non-digital ways of remembering how to do tasks and how to complete things they need to do. But when you move that online, there are a number of things you should probably remember. So one is you need to make sure that all of your tasks are clearly signposted. If you move across multiple pages of a website to complete a task, make sure that you clearly reference the step before, make it clearly and easily available to go back to that previous step, and that you're also easily able to check where you are in the process of ordering or of browsing. Another thing that you might want to improve is the introduction to the website, because for older people browsing for the first time, they may need more reassurance that they are at the right place, that they can achieve the task that they want to achieve in a way which is comfortable for them. The third thing is a little more towards the end of the funnel, and that is around error messaging. So here we have quite an in-your-face design example of how you can make sure that the elderly can check that what they're doing is correct, and if they do make a mistake, what they need to do to change that. If we refer back to those rates of usability on a few slides before, this kind of thing will really save you from having such a huge distinction between completion of tasks and not, between the senior generation and the digital native generation. So I wanted to make sure that you guys are thinking about that when working with your brands, and it's something that we've experienced quite a lot with some of the supermarkets that we work with. This has really been the trigger to prioritize these types of projects, which often sit on the backlog for a long time, especially things around accessibility. They're often talked about, but they tend to be quite a niche concern for a small part of an e-commerce department. But now they're really coming into the fore, and I think rightly so. So next, capturing and converting your traffic part 2. It's not just the older generation that are moving online for the first time into some particular industries and sectors. So if we take this particular example, this is a wine app which is owned by Lidl. And since Corona began, we are actually seeing a 36% increase in the Netherlands for online alcohol sales. Now imagine that normally you're a 25-year-old guy, you have a bottle of wine once a week, and normally you'd go to the supermarket or to the local winery and you'd actually have a conversation about what kind of wine you'd like to buy. That's currently not possible, and Lidl, who own this app, have recently developed this chatbot functionality to give you advice on what kind you should purchase when you're on their website. I think this is great functionality regardless of whether Corona is happening or not, because there are a lot of younger people who aren't wine experts, who don't necessarily want to have to make a stressful choice, and who might just really require a bit of assistance. And they're really being catered to with this kind of thing. Another thing here from Vivino. So this is quite fun. It's a quiz you can do to reveal your wine type, personality type. In this case, the coach dad is into more full-bodied reds. He likes whites, a bit chalky, and underneath this result from the quiz, which is based on your taste and flavour preferences, you can click through to an assortment of products which ideally narrow down your choice and selection a bit more and help you to make a good decision that you feel good about online. So it doesn't just work on one way, it's also the younger generation who are buying new things online for the first time to get through the Corona crisis. So the second area I want to talk about is the product optimization. And we have a few different things that we can do. So I've spoken to quite a few product teams recently whose strategies have been turned on their head or derailed by the fact of this arrival of Corona and changing consumer behaviour. So your developers' strategies, of course, may be a bit turned on their head, but now is a time when you can really come together as a product team and talk about those crazy things which are at the bottom of your backlog, maybe not even on the backlog, and really think about testing them now. Because you probably have, if you're in certain industries, if you have good email and communication strategy, a high level of traffic that you can actually test with and really try and see if these high contrast e-commerce or product changes will work. The other thing you can do is actually buckle down like Netflix and really consider the core why of your product or service, what it is you're really offering for users, and if that's sustainable through different phases of history and of consumer behaviour. This is also where you can start to innovate and invest a little more in those crazy side projects, which at the time weren't justified due to trying to hit targets for BAU, that now might really make the difference between your success or your extinction. Secondly, we have the idea of testing the core communication of your proposition. So recently it was Easter and I went online to try and buy Easter eggs for my family, and I saw this lovely message from Cadbury, who had taken over almost their entire homepage with the following slogan. So this is a riff on Cadbury's traditional glass and a half message. However, they've really updated the supporting proposition underneath. And I think it's a really nice way to really tap into the consumer base, but also see if you can stretch a bit the understanding of your proposition for the new visitors, for the new period of time. You can also go a bit more brave and bold than that. We have the example of Tesco's here, which uses a similar kind of approach to Cadbury in that it references the current situation. But you could go a step further. For example, when we've worked in the past with companies like McAfee, they've simultaneously tested several different versions of their proposition at the same time for different types of user. Now, the core proposition, the product underneath is the same, but the way you market it has a great variety of range that at this point in time, you can really get feedback on quickly and from a new user base. So tying into what I was saying before about the new traffic, the new visitors coming to your website or property, now is a great time to really see what works and what doesn't. And when we've optimized these kind of changes before, despite the fact that they're surprisingly easy in terms of development effort, those small copy changes can have really huge effects for you and your business in understanding and creating that rapport with your audience and the brand. So now I have a few more examples of do's and don'ts. This is a good example, in my opinion, of crisis pricing. So this is from one of our clients, Body and Fit. They are a sports nutrition website, and they've seen quite nice results from the stay-at-home vibe, because people are completely stuck and they need skipping ropes, they need protein, they need ways to stay in shape, and they're more concerned about that now because some of their options out of home have been taken away. So what Body and Fit do on a very regular basis is offer thoughtful and well-placed discounts and offers for their subscriber base and beyond, who are able to then apply those specifically to campaigns, products and positions which correspond to Corona, to the stay at home and the exercise outside theme. So what we think is, if this is done in the right way, in a sensitive way with context, it can help you really stand out against all the other brands who are also looking for share of mind, for headspace, and offering something similar. This is a way, I think, to cut through the noise, really acknowledge your users' need and maybe their problem, and offer a solution for that in a way that's sensitive and thoughtful. On the other hand, we have, for do's and don'ts, a classic example here from Booking, which highlights scarcity pricing. So you can see that is the element only 6 rooms left, only 1 room left. I really must say now is not the time for that kind of messaging, because people are stressed about access to core products like food, toilet paper. You know, they're not really going to feel good about a company who's trying to profiteer off of that mindset in this way, for this time, increasing that scarcity feeling, increasing that stress. In normal times, Booking does use this quite successfully to generate that feeling of scarcity, drive people through to the next step of the user journey. But in this case, I really wouldn't advise, unless you're a product or service which is really trying to appeal to an exclusive market and that may not need the same rapport with a mass audience. But yeah, that would be something, like I say, to avoid unless there is a really good reason people are stressed. So, in summary of my points earlier, I would say for e-commerce, you want to really adapt your communication strategy so you can entertain and support people. I can't overemphasize how important this is when you have that captive audience who are really on email a lot more, on Instagram a lot more, and looking to be entertained and supported. I would also recommend testing some more high contrast changes across your different demographics, because you're getting that increased number of visitors, you're getting those new types of visitors, and it's also a really good time to tidy up your website in terms of accessibility for new generations who might be coming online, and make sure that your features are in order for other new generations who might need a hand with choosing the types of products they want to buy from you. And then for products, obviously thinking a bit longer term, it's quite difficult to fully pivot your strategy at the moment, but I think you should definitely invest in those side projects, in those additions that you were thinking about that you might not have committed to. It doesn't have to be all of your dev resource, it just has to be enough to really do very basic POC and see if that can work or not based on the new situation. And the same thing, obviously, if you're going to pivot that, you absolutely want to test it online and see if it works. So, in summary, this is really how I think you can become adaptable, both tactically and longer term, in times of Corona. And I really hope that all of you are going okay in terms of any websites or product properties you're working on. And I'd be really interested to hear about people's experience in that. So on that note, I think I'm going to open the floor up to questions.
Cool, thank you very much. That's super insightful. We have a question here, which is about the, what do they call it? The grey pound, I suppose, which was, have you seen anybody kind of reshape their website a bit so that there is a clear call to action if you happen to be a more senior purchaser, so that they're taken through a different series of web pages that are, much more sort of clean, clear design, maybe bigger font by default, less stylized, let's say?
I've seen companies who are catering primarily to seniors doing that. So if you look at insurance, life insurance, policy websites, certain types of other products, they have a very clear focus on the silver surfer, and they certainly apply all of those accessibility principles. I would say a lot of them can and maybe should be applied anyway, because most of them in usability studies have been proven to have a positive effect, and few have had a really terrible impact on e-commerce. It's really more at the cost of design and maybe sleekness that you would hesitate, in my opinion, to test or apply them.
Okay, cool, thanks. And then the other question was, so as/when, I should say, shops and stores begin to reopen, how should somebody adjust their strategy?
Oh, that's a great question. I guess it is definitely not going to be business as usual, because we're going to have to observe the distancing rules even in store. So there are a few smaller shops and actually larger shops in the Netherlands who have reopened, and they, as well as the more concrete and administrative changes like maximum numbers of people, etc., they're really trying to make the in-store experience as helpful and as positive as possible. So they're putting more there into customer experience or customer service, when you walk through the door. I've seen people who are greeting, people who are personally handing you a trolley or a basket. I've seen more customer service attendees throughout the store to try and provide that positive experience. But it's a very good question for retail as to how they row back from this, because I think to some extent, and some other commentators have echoed my views, the way retail will be when we reopen is not necessarily going to be the same as before, not only in the long term, the short term, but the long term. Because people are now moving online temporarily, these reasons that we've mentioned, they are becoming used or habituated to purchase online and then wait for delivery. There are certain types of stores where that's just not as feasible. For example, in fashion, maybe you want to go and try something on. But these stores need to really, more than ever, focus on the omni-channel mix and create that seamless, joined up way of navigating from online to offline and back. And I've also seen a lot of companies trying to innovate in their delivery to try and replicate, of course, the short wait time, but also the experience of delivery being something a little bit extra on top of just dropping it off. So I think that's a great question that I can't fully answer, but I just have some thoughts for you there.
So the other one I probably won't ask then was, well, I will, but is could this be the start of the end of shops as we know it on the high street, as everybody, tries to move to online when they can?
I mean, again, it's a great question. I think people from Mike Ashley to the leader of the British Retail Consortium have all said that this is something where either the government needs to step to subsidise and perhaps artificially extend the shelf life of retail, or we need to consolidate and really smartly deploy people on the ground to represent the brand and to run the physical space. It could be the end of retail as we know it.
Well, at least it's a good time to know how to optimize all your online assets.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. Well, look, Kat, thank you so much. I will make sure that everybody gets a copy of this online. And if anybody has some questions, I've just got a few other comments, but if anybody has questions, feel free to reach out to us anyway, and we'll certainly get us and Kat to respond to you. But we will be running another one next week, so look out for the invites there. And as I say, please do let us know if you have any topics you'd love us to cover. Kat, thank you so much.
No problem. Okay, have a good day, guys. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.